word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. 24. Together we learn, together we.
Hello, Niall.
Hi, Pri.
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad.
You
How
all
are you
right?
doing? Yeah,
I'm all
good.
right. Yeah.
I'm glad I
So,
got the
where are
right
you?
times. I was worried
Say
I'd have the
again?
wrong, I was worried I would have the wrong times. I always get time zones wrong, so I'm glad I did okay.
Yeah, sometimes it can be confusing with daylight saving time. So when it
Exactly.
applies, it can be
Exactly.
changing from 6 to 5 hours. So Joyce also confirmed me like 2 times, like what's the time difference? Am I on the right time? Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe it's time to check I think you sounds all right. Let's
Yeah,
check your video and then to your slides, perhaps.
super.
Uh, Hang on. Can anyone assign co-host to Niall so that he can share screen? Okay, I think you're co-host now, so you can share your screen, Niall.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Right. Okay. So yeah, this is one is all right. So maybe move 1 or 2 slides. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. This is all right.
Super. Should
Okay.
I leave the
So
screen up? Do you think that would be, should I leave it there? Yeah.
maybe stop sharing your screen. So we are going to play our promotional videos,
Ah,
and
okay,
then we
super.
will let you know when to share your screen.
Super.
Yeah. So yesterday the session started at 15:30 due
Mhm.
to some opening remarks, but now we are going to start at 1500
Super.
and end the session at 1700.
Great. I watched Joyce's talk as well, so I could see whether there would be any overlap, but I think it should be okay. And I'm gonna maybe I saw your email, so I think what I'll do is I'll
Mm.
take things quite slowly, because
Yes,
what
that
I'm doing is a little complicated. So I'm gonna go through it quite slowly and make sure that everybody can follow along, and
yeah,
maybe I'll repeat things a few times so people can
yeah.
see.
And it is not a problem if you cannot finish all the slides. It is important, I think, because first, not all the participants speak English as their native language.
Yeah.
Many of them speak English as the second or foreign language, so maybe take it slow in terms of language. And also for the
Will do.
materials, the level of technical knowledge about corpus linguistics may vary. I
Yeah.
think some of the participants are also the participant from last year's, but most of the participants are new. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, just take it slow, and maybe in the middle, ask people if they can follow, and in case they have problems, and in some cases we can just send instructions, verbal instructions, it can be solved, but in many cases, in some other cases, it's quicker to ask them to share a screen, and yeah, look at the
Perfect.
problem and resolve.
No
Yeah.
problem at all.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Dr. Niall, let me introduce you to the head of the linguistic department, Dr. Heri Chandra. Dr. Oktiva Heri Chandra, can you open your mic and the video? Okay.
Hello, Niall. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Dr. Chandra. Nice to meet you too.
Yes, as a representative of English department, so thank you very much for joining our summer course and then to be one of our speakers.
Not at all. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Yeah, I talked so many times like Hantoro and said that one of the speaker will Dr. Neil TV and then, oh yes, thank you very much, much people have us to have a very, very excellent speaker for the summer course.
Oh, it's very kind. I really appreciate that. Well, I hope I live up to it.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and again, maybe in some other opportunities, we can talk about other collaborative measures, like maybe
Definitely.
student exchange.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
yeah, if it is possible. Right. So now we have 23 participants, but yeah, last time, yesterday, we have almost 90 attended participants.
Very good.
In the beginning, like there were like 20 or 30, but some of them they joined late. Right. So okay, Niall, we are going to play the promotional videos.
Okay.
Okay, and yeah, we will invite you back at 1500, and
Alright.
the meeting will be recorded. Yeah,
Great.
it's a part of our responsibilities because this summer course is funded by our university.
Yeah, no problem
Okay,
at all.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and participants from around the globe, good morning and welcome to the Diponegoro Summer Course on Corpus Linguistics, Dipscorling 2024. We are thrilled to have you join us for this exciting and enriching event. This summer course offers a unique opportunity for scholars, researchers, and students to delve into the fascinating world of corpus linguistics. Dipscorling 2024 features an exceptional lineup of keynote speakers, each a luminary in the field of corpus linguistics. We are honoured to welcome Dr. Joyce Lim from Aston University, UK. Dr. Lim's groundbreaking work in discourse analysis and corpus linguistics has significantly advanced our understanding of language use in various contexts. Her insights and research contributions are invaluable to our community. Dr. Niall Curry from Manchester Metropolitan University, UK. Dr. Curry's expertise in language teaching and learning, combined with his innovative approach to corpus-based research, has made substantial impacts on the field. We eagerly anticipate his perspectives on the latest trends and applications in corpus linguistics. Yede Primahadi Wijaya Rajek, PhD from Oxford University, UK, and Udayana University, Indonesia. Dr. Primahadi's interdisciplinary research, bridging cognitive linguistics and corpus studies, offers a profound understanding of language patterns and cognitive processes. His work is a testament to the power of corpus linguistics in unraveling the complexities of human language. Prihantoro, PhD from Diponegoro University, Indonesia. As a prominent figure in the Indonesian linguistic community, Dr. Prihantoro's research on Indonesian language corpora and sociolinguistics provides crucial insights into language variation and use in Indonesia. His contributions have been instrumental in advancing corpus-based studies in the region. This year's summer course has attracted more than 100 participants from diverse corners of the world, including the UK, USA, Egypt, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Poland, and many more. This international representation underscores the global relevance and appeal of corpus linguistics. Your presence here is a testament to the vibrant and dynamic nature of our field. Throughout the course, you will engage in workshops, lectures, and collaborative projects designed to deepen your understanding and application of corpus linguistic methods. Our goal is to create an environment that fosters learning, innovation, and collaboration, paving the way for new discoveries and advancements in our field. We are confident that Dipscorling 2024 will be a memorable and transformative experience for all participants. We encourage you to take full advantage of the opportunities presented, network with fellow participants and speakers, and immerse yourself in the stimulating academic atmosphere. Once again, welcome to Dipscorling 2024. Let us embark on this journey of exploration and discovery together. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and participants from around the globe, good morning and welcome to the Diponegoro Summer Course on Corpus Linguistics, Dipscorling 2024. We are thrilled to have you join us for this exciting and enriching event. This summer course offers a unique opportunity for scholars, researchers, and students to delve into the fascinating world of corpus linguistics. Dipscorling 2024 features an exceptional lineup of keynote speakers, each a luminary in the field of corpus linguistics. We are honoured to welcome Dr. Joyce Lim from Aston University, UK. Dr. Lim's groundbreaking work in discourse analysis and corpus linguistics has significantly advanced our understanding of language use in various contexts. Her insights and research contributions are invaluable to our community. Dr. Niall Curry from Manchester Metropolitan University, UK. Dr. Curry's expertise in language teaching and learning, combined with his innovative approach to corpus-based research, has made substantial impacts on the field. We eagerly anticipate his perspectives on the latest trends and applications in corpus linguistics. Yede Primahadi Wijaya Rajek, PhD from Oxford University, UK, and Udayana University, Indonesia. Dr. Primahadi's interdisciplinary research, bridging cognitive linguistics and corpus studies.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dipscorling 2024 Day 2. We hope everyone is well. My name is Aryan.
My name is Rani.
And we will be your host for today's session. Today, we are back with another engaging session.
As here about to begin the session shortly, you might turn on your camera so now we can actually communicate and discuss better. On today's session, we will learn about corpus query techniques with Dr. Niall Curry from Manchester Metropolitan University, United Kingdom. We'd like to welcome Dr. Niall Curry. Hello, Dr. Curry. How are you?
Hi, yes, very good. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're actually great too.
Yes, we are doing great, Dr. Curry. Before we hand over the session to you, allow me to read your CV for a little bit. So, Dr. Niall Curry
Share screen CV.
is a senior lecturer in applied linguistics at Manchester Metropolitan University. And with a PhD in linguistics from the University of Limerick, he is a versatile scholar whose research spans diverse areas of applied linguistics. Dr. Curry's expertise includes corpus linguistics, contrastive linguistics, discourse analysis, English medium instruction, and language pedagogy. Dr. Curry is actively involved in editorial roles, including as co-editor of the Routledge Applied Corpus Linguistics and Routledge Corpus Linguistics Guides book series. And his current research focuses on the social and discursive construction of knowledge around global crises and issues across contexts and cultures.
Okay, so that's it for the CV. So if you want to know more about Dr. Niall Curry, you can actually consult his CV or contact him via emails. And now I will hand over the session to the Dr. Niall Curry. So Dr. Niall Curry, it's time.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank you very much, Dr. Brian Soro and Dr. Chandra, for having me here to present at the summer school. I really appreciate it. So I hope what I share with you all today will be something that will give you a bit of insight into new ways of maybe looking at data that you've already been using for different purposes. Or if you're new to corpus linguistics, I hope I don't scare you away. So let me move on to my presentation. Excuse me. There you go. So today for this session, I'm going to be covering this notion of corpus query techniques that I think Joyce kind of touched on yesterday when she looked at things like part of speech tagging and different kinds of features like this. So I'm going to kind of remind us of a little bit about what that is and then dig into Sketch Engine. And I've done this in a very practical way. So I'm going to try and get you to learn how to use some of these techniques in the same way that I learned how to use some of these techniques, which is trial and error. So we're going to work on it together. We're going to take our time to work through different kinds of tasks. And then I'm going to show you solutions to these tasks, ways that we could get around the data and use corpus query techniques to be able to look for things that are a bit more precise. So with that in mind, like I said, this kind of focus on part of speech will be important. So I'm going to remind us of what those parts of speech are in just a moment. And then we'll do our series of tasks, but also please do ask questions as you go. So if you're unsure, pop a question in the chat box. Don't get lost. We have time, so we can take our time. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them as we go along. So I'll keep an eye on the chat box. Okay, so to kind of start us off, I'm going to move us over onto Sketch Engine. And then get us looking at this. So you might want to take a moment to log into Sketch Engine because we'll be using it actively this morning. And for this, what I want to first start with is a reminder of where we're looking. So if you go onto this kind of dashboard area here, you'll remember that Joyce talked you through all of these different kinds of features yesterday. Today, we're going to be staying in the area of concordance largely, but we're going to be focusing particularly on ways that we can filter using kind of the likes of CQL. So we have this CQL button here. Now, when we do CQL, CQL stands for Corpus Query Language. When we do this kind of research, basically what we're doing is we're writing a very specific kind of like a code that helps pull out lots of information based on tagging features that are in the data. So to give you a bit of context on that, if you come up here on any corpus that you look at in the BNC, you'll see the word tag set here. Now, there are lots of different types of tag sets that are developed in order to be able to tag data. Some of these tag things like parts of speech. So they say whether something is a noun or a verb or an adjective. Some of them do things like semantic tagging. So they might tag by a particular functional or semantic domain. So what is the kind of meaning? And we're focusing specifically on parts of speech tagging. So if you click on the word tag set on whatever corpus you're looking at, it will open up and it will give you the tag set used. And this is our code, right, really, that we're going to be using today. So I'm going to take a brief moment to talk you through this little code so that you can see what it looks like. And then we're going to operationalize that code as we go. So if we scroll down along here, everyone can see my screen on Sketch Engine with the tags, right? Yeah, super. So we have these kinds of almost kind of wildcard tags that help us look for particular kinds of kind of symbols or different elements of punctuation, etc. here. But what we're really interested in is the POS tag, part of speech. And you'll see that I'm going to scroll very quickly for a second. There are lots of them. So we have lots of different tags. Different tag sets have a different number of tags, different levels of granularity. So we might break nouns down into subgroups in some tags. In some groups, they might be all together under one. So that's why it's important to know what your tag set is. So if we look at the top here, we can see CC, coordinating conjunction, cardinal number, possessive numeral, determiner. So all of these kinds of I guess all of these kinds of grammatical categories that we might be familiar with. We also have things like the existential there. So I guess what this shows us with part of speech tagging is that they're also linked to different kinds of linguistic frameworks in ways. So this existential there is something that we might think comes from the likes of systemic functional linguistics, thinking kind of Michael Halliday's work in this area. A foreign word, IN for preposition, subordinating conjunction. We've got JJ for adjective. So not always what you might expect. You might have thought an adjective would have an A tag, but it has a J tag, JJ. If we move down along, modal verbs, MD, and then we go into nouns and look at all of these different variations of nouns that we can have. So there's lots of different ways of searching for nouns, lots of different tags for nouns. So lots of different things to think about there. As we move down through into the kind of P's, we've got predeterminer, personal pronoun, possessive pronouns, and so on. Another very important one here, adverb or B for adverb. But then we also have variations on adverbs. So comparatives, superlatives. We've got particles. So for phrasal verbs, for example. We've got punctuation, sentence break punctuation, symbol.
Niall,
Oh,
Niall,
yes.
sorry. It seems that you are sharing in portrait mode, so it's not fully, it's not landscape. I don't know. Okay, now it's all right.
It's okay. Sorry,
Yeah,
probably
yeah, now
because
it's
I've
okay.
I've shortened my screen. Apologies about that.
Okay, now it's all right. You can resume your presentation.
Thank you, thank you. So we have this infinitive to, so we can look for particular kind of forms with this, and so on. And then we move into verbs, and you can see there are lots of different verbs. We've got tags for the verb to be at different kind of tense levels. We've got tags for the verb have. We've got tags for the verb, for other verbs then, for regular verbs, past tense, present participles, past participles, and so on. So a lot of different kinds of potential then when we see this, but also a lot of challenges because we need to figure out a way to be able to make use of these tags that in a way that helps us find what we're looking for, but doesn't maybe avoid things we might not expect, right? So if we just search for one thing, we might be missing important things that have other kinds of tags. Now, an important caveat with any kind of tag-based research is that they're automatically applied, which means that they have degrees of confidence, of accuracy. And depending on the kind of data that you're applying these tags to, they'll be more or less accurate. So, for example, in spoken data, this kind of tagging is often less accurate than in written data because these are trained on written language data and they maybe conform to certain kinds of rules in a certain way. Or if you're working on learner data, again, there might be challenges in applying these kind of tags in terms of how accurate they are. So whenever we do any analysis with this, we also need to validate the tagging ourselves. We need to do kind of sample tests to see, okay, is this accurate? How many of these are accurately applied? And you can imagine, for example, with words like will, it's a modal verb, but it could also be a noun, right? To have like a strong will. So it might get those wrong in some ways. And it uses kind of cotext to be able to figure this out and probability. So these kinds of things are not infallible. And so we shouldn't just trust them explicitly or implicitly. Rather, we need to be critical of them. But they do make some kinds of searches very accessible and very expedient, which means we can do more with the data that we get thereafter. Just to say that before I move into looking at some examples, what I'm going to talk about today is focusing on English, and I'm going to use the BNC corpus, the same corpus that Joyce used yesterday, because I kind of wanted to bring that same idea forward and show how we can look at the same data in different ways. But if you look on the Sketch Engine, their website, there's lots of preloaded corpora for different languages, and there are tag sets for different languages as well. So they won't all match. So if you're studying a language other than English, everything I talk about today will be relevant for what you do in this workshop for any other language. You just need to make sure that you familiarize yourself with the tag set, and you can find that. I'll share the link. Maybe I can pop the link in the chat so that you have it for after as well. I'll pop it in here. So that's the link to the tag set. Okay, so is that clear to everybody what I'm kind of talking about here, this kind of tag set? If you have any questions, do pop them in the chat. There's no silly questions in a corpus workshop. Okay, so I'm going to move over onto a Sketch Engine just to show you a few more bits around this before moving into doing some kinds of testing with this. So, like I said, everything we're going to be doing is under concordance. And when you go to concordance, you have basic and advanced, and we're going to be looking at advanced. And you get a list here, and we're going to be looking at CQL. Now, to show you one or two things here, if you are unsure about how to find the tags, what tags you should be looking for, you can always start by searching for what you're interested in. And if you go into Sketch Engine, this little eye here gives you view options. And if you click tags and click save, it gives you the tags underneath each word. So that way, if you're unsure about what tag you might be interested in searching for, this will give you a way in. So you might search for particular words you want to look at and say, okay, what kind of tags are these? And then you might get alternatives for those kind of things. The reason that we might do this is because maybe we're interested in a particular construction that involves a particular adjective, but we want to also know, are there other adjectives that could slot into that same position? What other kind of things happen there? So that's just something to be mindful of. You can see all those tags there. Anyway, I'll take that away because it's not so nice to look at. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little task, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on each task, and then I'm going to show you some sample responses. And I say sample responses because there's lots of ways to solve your problems with a corpus, and as long as we solve the problem, it doesn't matter too much as how we get there. So this is about finding whether this particular approach will be valuable for you. So I'm going to share my going to be switching back and forth between my PowerPoint and my sketch engine. I hope that's okay. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a moment in Sketch Engine to think about how you could find examples of the present perfect, sorry, presence in there twice. Examples of the present perfect. So things like, I have read that book before. What does that look like? How could you find, I don't want you to find just an example of I have read. I want you to find any kinds of verbs that could be the past participle. So I want you to take a moment to play around with Sketch Engine and think about how you could do that. So we're looking for the present perfect. Is that clear? I'm assuming from silence
Yeah.
that it's clear.
Yeah, feel free to write anything on the chat box if it is not clear. And if you have specific part that Niall can repeat, if that makes the understanding better, feel free to do so. Yeah. And also, if you haven't created a Sketch Engine account, or if your Sketch Engine account is expired, so maybe you can use free Sketch and free Corpora. I think it's label open. I will send you the list. So you can use Brown Corpus, for example. Same functionality, even though the data may be different, but you will get exactly the same interface. So don't worry, even though you don't access the same corpus, the interface would be exactly the same error, and almost all of the functionalities will be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything I'm doing today will work with that for sure. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute or two to go into Sketch Engine. You're going to go to CQL and you're going to try and find a way to find your present perfect tenses. For this, I'm using the BNC, but you can use any other data. But if you want to compare with my answers, perhaps the BNC is the way to go. So what I want you to find is the present perfect. So it could be something, I'll pop an example in the chat so that people can see. Something like, I've read that book before. So this kind of like have plus past participle structure for the present perfect. So some nice ideas coming through in the chat. Yeah, good hint, Pri. Good hint. So we have a suggestion in the chat that I think is a good starting point. I'm gonna pop it in so you can see as an example, but then I'll show you some other ways that we might approach this. So all you need to do is type it in here. So when you do a query, normally what you do is you use square brackets for each word that you want. You have the kind of form you want here, which could be lemma or word, things like that. And then you put what you're searching for in between particular kind of um, quote marks. And then you don't have a space. You just move to the next one, square brackets. Here we say tag, because what we're looking for is a tag. And then we've got VVN in between quote marks. Now, if you do that wrong, you will get an error message. So let's say, for example, you leave out the kind of quotation marks and click go, you get an error message. So everything needs to be between quote marks. We don't want any spaces in between everything, and we want to keep things kind of within the particular square brackets. Now, if you do this, this will be kind of our first kind of effort at thinking, okay, what does have look like in terms of present perfect, and are we getting everything that we might want? So you just type it into the thing into CQL and go. So I'm gonna take this first one. I'm going to give you a little less time now, and I'm going to show you an example of different ways into it and then tease them apart in terms of what they stand for. And then I'm going to give you another similar one to practice with right away afterwards. So that way we can kind of make sure that everybody understands how to build these queries. So this is a good first attempt, so good suggestion, but there are a couple of things that maybe we need to think about. When we use something like the lemma have, inevitably we're also going to get words like had. So here, for example, Cindy's suggestion is a good attempt to try and move past that, right? So we've got have or has. So we're not going to have had, which we have down here. So this is a different tense, right? Had worked. So we're not getting present perfect here. We're getting something slightly different. So that what we need to do first, I guess, is think about what kind of forms of have we want to have there. And then we might think about other kinds of verbs that might follow. So here we have, for example, VVN. So this is kind of our past participle. Now, this is a little cheat on my part, but I know that from using the data that sometimes because the tags aren't always accurate, sometimes the past tense tag gets applied to some of the past participles. So we might want to use both. If we use something like a tag v dot star, so as we have here, tag v dot star, which is a good suggestion as well. What we get from something like this are lots of other so we see now if we go back to what VVN was, look at the numbers change. We've got VVN, we go from 472,000 to V dot star, we go up to 709,000. So we're getting more. Now we're getting things like have been, have provided. So been coming up a lot, which was something that was missing before. And then, but what we might also be getting in here, because we're not looking for specific verb forms, are things that we didn't necessarily want to begin with. So something that we can think about. Now, what other things could we consider? Well, what about when we have words that come in between our verbs and so on? So one option we have is to do something like this. So we could say, okay, I want to look for a pronoun. I want to look for some personal pronoun. And then here we say, okay, I want the option that there might be an adverb in here. Maybe there's an adverb, I'm not sure. So we say adverb and we put a little question mark afterwards. A question mark after the tag, after the bracket, says this is optional. So we don't necessarily have this particular thing as a must. And then we have here tag equals VHP. So this is have in the present tense. But then also sometimes you might have adverbs in between. So the adverb could come somewhere else. And so what we get here is another optional adverb. And then here we can layer in our tags, right? So we can say, okay, I want the tag to either be a past participle or a past tense. And why have I put this dot star here? Well, the dot means any random character that is admissible. So we know, for example, that there's VVN, so it captures all of those. And we know, for example, that there's VHN. So we have all of those coming in there as well. And so what we can do is put this little dot in, and the star means repeating in case there's another letter that comes in between. Because what we know is that if it begins with a V and ends in an N, it's some form of past participle. And it's the same for the D. It also means that it's possible that there's nothing if you put the star. The star means that it could be this or it could just be VN. So it gives us the option of flexibility. So if we do something like this and we click go, and I'm going to share all of these codes with you, so then you have them forever to play around with the data. We might get a few different things. So things like they have also indicated, right? They have radically altered. So now we're starting to get a bit more information, but when we're looking at this in a string where maybe we want it with a pronoun, with other things like that. So we've got different kinds of information coming in there. And we can move that along and we can see these kinds of examples. So if we wanted to pull out example sentences for language teaching, for example, these can be quite useful. And I'll show you one last variation of this, and then I'm going to go through it all again to explain what's happening, because I know that this is a good bit of information to give you a little bit of context. So one last variation of this is, you'll notice that the question marks are now gone. Instead, what we have is this. So we say pronoun, adverb, and here, this little kind of curly bracket, what this is basically is a range. So if I put 0, it means it's possible that there are no adverbs. But also if I put comma 3, it means that I said I'd allow for up to 3 adverbs, because maybe sometimes you might have something like I've really, really tried to do something, right? So we might have 2 adverbs coming together. VHP, and then the same thing again here. Tag sequence with the or adverb and then the range. And if we click go on this, we get many of the same examples, but we'll also include ones where they have multiple compounding adverbs. And this is particularly useful in the likes of spoken language, where spoken language sometimes we have these kinds of multiply kind of compounding features. Here's a nice example. because not is an adverb, we will say we have also not mentioned. Now, if we just had one adverb option, we wouldn't have pulled this example sentence out. So we'll be missing things if we don't kind of layer in this kind of information. Okay, so I'm gonna talk you through all of that again, because I know that that can be a little tricky. So basically, what we're saying is we want to look for present tense or present perfect. And so we need to familiarize ourselves with our tags and understand what it is that we're searching for. So we might be interested in looking for full sentences that contain people and adverbs and present perfect aspects. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to slowly build up our sentence, and we're going to say, okay, I want my pronoun. And then I'm going to be open to the idea that there is an adverb in my sentence. If I decided that I only wanted one adverb as an option, I can use a question mark and say, this is basically giving me the sentence that has just one adverb in between the pronoun and the auxiliary verb have. But if I decided I wanted to be more open, I want to say, okay, there could be multiple adverbs in between the pronoun and the verb have. Then I have my verb have in the present tense. So we can say VHP, which we can pull from our tag set here. We can go down and we can look for our verbs and see we've got verb have, singular present, and so on. So then we can pull that out, and then we can say tag or B, same thing, 0 to 3, and then tag VVN and VVD. And so these things give us options for whether or not we want to include adverbs. And these give us the kind of codes to be able to look for parts of speech that co-occur. Now, this won't necessarily give us everything that is correct, but you can see that when we add in more detailed queries like this, we do get more dedicated responses that are more likely to be present perfect continuous. We're not necessarily searching for this function of the present perfect continuous. We're just looking for co-occurring forms, and we're trying to write the query in a way that removes noise, etc. But we also need to remain open to different kind of ways in which other words might feature. And so this will really matter when we think about the kinds of language that we're using, because let's say, for example, we build this query for present perfect continuous, then we can say, okay, this works well for certain kinds of written text, but does it work for spoken? Does it work for learner language? If we're interested in errors, for example, does it make sense to search for particular structures that would exclude errors because they're accurately constructed? So these kind of things won't necessarily give us everything we're looking for. It really depends on our question. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? You may have found other ways. Oh, yes, I can see something. You may have found other ways into the data. So there are lots of different ways to kind of work with this. One thing to think about here is you have other ways of being able to check these kind of forms. So if you go, for example, tags, it gives you different versions of these tags, and you can look to see which ones are more frequent. So we've got present. So with this one, for example, we've got the options of adverbs in different positions. So let's say with this example here, or this example here, we've got 3 adverbs in a row there. So we can take a little look and see what that looks like. So we've not as yet decided. Do you see what I mean? So here we've got the present perfect form. Here we've got the past participle, and then in between we've got these tags that are kind of separating us out, so up to 3. Perhaps there are 4, perhaps there are 5. So these are things that we can play around with and see. But I guess it's about checking the data as we need it to be able to. We have surely not adequately characterized. So we have these things happening in between. And actually, that might be one of your research questions. You might be interested in what happens in between these two parts of speech. How do we what do we do? How are we using adverbs in perfective contexts, etc. Is that clear? So my next suggestion would be, and kind of thinking about this in line with the present perfect, what would we do if we were looking for the past perfect? So take a moment or two to think about the past perfect. I'll pop an example of what I mean by the past perfect in the chat. Da, da, da.
Hi, sorry to interrupt a bit. So just to let everyone know that if you're using Sketch Engine, there are 2 different types of BNC, and another type of BNC is tagged by clause. So maybe if you have a slightly different result of if your query language does not work, so that might be one of the sort of the problems. So I think Neil here is used just the BNC, but there is another BNC tagged by clause, and sometimes in some conference, some people by mistake use BNC spoken because they just search for BNC. So make sure you are in the right
Yeah.
corpus. If your result is not the same, does not mean that your technique is incorrect. So maybe you're just in the wrong corpus. Okay.
Indeed. Yes, if your query is incorrect, really you'll get something like you'll get this. So if it's going through, it means the query works. It just means maybe that you're on a different data set. So thank you for that, Priya. It's a good point. With this and thinking about your future use of tag sets, if you click on the information button, it takes you to information about your corpus. You can find out which tag set it uses here. So you can get a bit more information there. So something to be mindful of. So with this one, it's relatively straightforward. We have VHP to VHP, and that will change the present to the past. And we get different examples here. So again, same points apply here. If we change this to, of course, you absolutely can use your own corpus to do these queries. It means that you'll get different responses here, but if they're working for you, that's all that really matters. So what you need to make sure is that when you upload your corpus into Sketch Engine, that that you're to see which tag set it's tagged with, which you can find out by clicking on this little information button on the top here. You can click on tag set and it'll tell you, and then you use those tags in the exact same way. You just substitute them for these letters in here. But the overall build is the same. So these are kind of the important thing. Do you want me to paste the code in the chat? Is that what you mean, Ijaz? So like this, is that what you mean? One thing to say again, so if we look here, we've got 116,664 examples. If I click go, we've got fewer. Because what we've done is we've removed the number of adverbs, right? So we've changed it from um, 0 to 3 to just one optional. So that changes our overall recall. So not a massive difference there, which is not necessarily so problematic, but at the same time, it is a change. So it just goes to show that these things aren't so simple and that they're always going to give you the same thing. If you look for something slightly different, you might get a slightly different recall on that. So at this point, I want to take a moment to remind you of a few different things and then to show you one other kind of feature here that is helpful. So always we need square brackets, right? So everything starts with square brackets, and they have these useful little buttons here to kind of insert them for you if you find that easier. And within a square bracket, you choose your particular feature that you're interested in. So it might be a word, and you do word. It might be lemma, which might be a lemma. You might be interested in lowercase words, so like no case sensitivity, so that way we can see, and so on. And I'll give you a full list of these in a moment. Then it goes with an equal sign, and then we always have two inverted quote marks. And then we pop in here the particular thing we're looking for. So if it's tag, a word, etc. A note of caution. You know, on Microsoft Word, when you write things out, sometimes it'll give you quotation marks and they'll be kind of curly. They call them curly quotation marks. If you copy and paste those in here, it doesn't work. So you need to make sure that they're these kinds of straight quotation marks. Now, you might think that's okay. I'll see that they look different. Sometimes they don't look different. It keeps the code of it being curly, but it doesn't look curly on the screen. My suggestion is to type directly into Sketch Engine. That way you'll know that you're doing it right. And you'll know where it's gone wrong. So that's what we do. We put in our little tags. What have we learned? We've learned that question marks are wild cards. So they tell us optional options. So we can say have it or don't have it, but give me both. We also know that with these kind of curly brackets, we can give range. So that was another feature that we learned in this, that we can say, okay, to have it or don't have it, or have it in between this range. So we could say 0 to 3. Now we might decide our research question might be rather, sorry. A research question might be such that we actually want to find adverbs in between. So we could actually specify and say 1 to 3. So that way it excludes things that don't have adverbs. So we play around with this depending on our research questions. So now we'll see we're going to get a much smaller number, 187, a much smaller number that contains adverbs in between the pronoun and the present, the have form, and in between the have form and the past participle. So everything we do kind of influences or impacts that particular outcome of the query. So we need to be very careful about what we do. And when we report it, we should include the query that we use, so that way people can see how we got there and kind of go from there. You can also find the tags for your corpus here. So it gives you examples, but it's not exhaustive. So you can click here for all tags. Oh, Abdul, I'll have a little think about an article I can maybe share with Pri there aren't so many articles that talk through how to do this kind of thing, but there are some useful guidebooks. I think Pre shared one in the chat already, but I can share some of my preferred ones with Pre, and maybe we can circulate them as part of the summer school. And your question's quite good in the sense that like this is the kind of thing that's often in the background of corpus research, and it rarely makes it to the publication because it takes up a lot of space, but it's actually quite important because it's how we get to the end result. So it is kind of something that's missing. But I'll share all of these slides with you and as well, and then we can share some links to useful online resources, some blog sites and things like that explain how to do these things. But actually, the best way to do it really is to just trial and error, play around with it, and see how you go. I hope that answers your a bit of an unsatisfying response, I accept. But people don't write this stuff down enough, in my view. So there's that. So you can click here to get your all tags if you want to get all the tags. That'll take you to what I showed you earlier on another web page. Now this is another thing, a user-friendly tool for building corpus queries. This is something else you can use. And so you can start here where you decide what is it that you're looking for. So you're looking for a particular kind of form, and then you can say, what do you want? Do you want a word, a lemma, lempos, word lowercase, lemma lowercase, etc. And then you can type in your value here, etc. So we have different kinds of things that we might be interested in looking for there. It helps you build out your query in the same way. So here I put like climate, let's say climate, and then you can go. When you're finished with your query, you can say use this CQL and it'll take you to the page and it will input your CQL for you. But personally, I find it easier to just type because I build it in my mind as I'm moving along. I don't find this tool as intuitive, but if you find it helpful, go for it. Whatever makes this an easier process for you. And then you have these little buttons here that help you build this particular thing out. Does that make sense? The other thing that I want to remind you of are these two wildcards here. So we use a little punctuation mark, the kind of the period full stop mark, to say any character that could occur in between these two other characters I've given or after this character I've given. And the asterisk is saying maybe that it could be nothing. So it modifies the previous one, say maybe there's nothing in between, or there's lots of things in between. So it's kind of like a multiplier, but it's also potentially a reducer to say that there's nothing there. So why would that be important? Let's look at our tag set. Da, 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 da. So if we go and look for VV, right? We've got VV, and then we've got VVD, VVG, VVN, right? So I'm going to do something really simple. I'll go here and I'm just going to do one very simple query. I'm going to do the query VV. So if I look for VV, I get a bunch of verbs that are in the present tense here. So if we look at the description, we say verb base form. Now, if I go to here and let's say I want all of those other verbs. I want the VVG, the VVN, etc. And kind of we want that kind of information. Well, what we can do is we could say VV dot. And VV dot will give us all those other ones, right? VVG, VVN, VVZ, and we'll go. Now watch the numbers on the top and they'll change. Now, when we have this, we don't necessarily have our VV form because the dot means that we need to fill that with a particular character in some way, shape, or form. So what we can do is we can add an asterisk, and that means that if there's something that could follow, take it. We'll have that too. If there's nothing, then we'll just look for the VV. So it gives you both. So if you're not sure what you're going to get, then it's better to use both because it'll broaden you out. And watch here, the numbers have jumped up. So we've brought all of that together. So that wild card is quite valuable, and then we can start to filter things out as and when we need them. So these kind of things are quite useful. Yes. Oh, thanks for sharing that pre in the chat. Yeah, and I'll have a think about I'm sure there's some things that I've got on Corpus Career Lang. I have books behind me here, but there's nothing coming to mind. So I'll have a look after our workshop, and then I'll share some suggestions with pre on top of those as well. So yeah. Okay, so we have we've kind of looked at these different wildcard features. So what do we want to do next? Our next job is to look for another query. So I'm going to give you something a bit more challenging. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to look for the future perfect. That one, sorry. So take a moment and try to find all examples of the future perfect. For example, I will have finished by then. Yes, good reminder, pre avoid curly quotes. So I would recommend just writing it straight into Sketch Engine. Because if you copy and paste from Word, sometimes it doesn't work. It adds in spaces or it changes the nature of the quotation marks. So you'll get an error message. And if you're unsure, you can remind yourself of the codes here. And give you a few minutes to figure out the future perfect. If anyone's having any difficulty, oh, I can absolutely, Mohammed. If anyone's having any difficulty, by the way, with anything, just let us know. We can, share screens and figure out anything. Don't get lost. We have time, so we can take our time. So the full stop is kind of, I guess it's a wild card. That's what they call in this kind of software. They call them wild cards, and that it's kind of a substitute for any other possible variable. So because I'll just type into this, because we can have v hn, we can have vvn, and we can have vbn. So if I wanted to search for all possible past participles, I'd have to look for all of those. But actually, a simpler thing I can do is I could look for v.n. v.n replaces that dot with any other character that exists in the kind of taxonomy of characters that we're using, which is the tags, in between v and n. So it will find vbn, vhn, vvn. So that's what that does, and it will work for anything. So in the same way, with like a simple query, we can use we can look for, I guess, let's see here. I'll do word equals, and I can go interest dot star here. And if I do this, it will find anything that could maybe end with interest and then characters that follow. Now, if I just did interest with a dot, then I won't really get anything here because there aren't word or interest. There should be interests. Yeah, it's misspelling. So here I'll get interests, just interests, because it's really the only thing that could follow on from interest. But if I do interest dot star, it'll find the word interest by itself, interests, but also interesting, interested, and so on and so forth. So really, they're just wildcards to say any one character, whatever it may be, and then this one is maybe nothing actually. So it's to the power of zero, or then multiplied by zero, multiplied by one, by two, by three, and so on. And so we can get as many variables as that on that as possible. If we wanted, I guess, to layer them up, we could do interest, and this will get us interested. So we're only getting two characters afterwards, not one, not zero, not three. Whereas here we pop in the dot star, then we won't get one, but we will get two, three, four, five, six, and so on. So they're kind of a flexible little duo in terms of helping us look for truncated words. So if you're looking up in Corpus Query instruction manuals, things like that, we're often talking about truncation when we use these things. But it also works for the kind of query for tags where there are kind of tags that are similar to each other. So you're just changing out one character for another. Does that answer your question, Mohammed? Super. Okay, so we're talking about the future perfect. So what do we have for the future perfect? Um, So here's one I prepared earlier. Make sure it works, and then I'll send it in the chat. Okay, it did work. Now there's a couple of things going on here. I'll pop this in the chat just in case anyone wants it. A couple of things going on here. We have the word will, so we're interested in the word will. Now we have it as a word. We could also change this to LC, and then that would be lowercase, or not case sensitive, basically, which would give us, I think, more or less the same because it will appear in the middle of a sentence. But sometimes there's issues with the capitalization in text. So it can be useful sometimes to use LC instead of word because it is word, but it'll include all capitalized versions as well, if that's what you're looking for. So we've got will, and now I've got this ampersand. So this ampersand will basically mean that it's kind of I want it to be both. I want it to be the word will, and I also want it to satisfy this other criterion, and the criterion here being that it's a modal verb. Why have I specified this? Well, maybe there might be instances in which will is appearing as a noun, like to the strength of will or something like that. It probably is unlikely in this overall query for that to happen, but you never know. So you can be more precise in this way. And as I did before, I've added in potential adverbs to appear around the verbs that I'm interested in. I've got my tag for the base form of the verb have. So have as an auxiliary, following the modal. And then I've got more options for adverbs. And then I've got my past participle endings. So the same as what we had in the present perfect, the past perfect, these kind of endings. But the verb form has changed to a base level form. And then we have will at the beginning to try and pull out this particular structure. And so what we end up getting is something that is quite focused. I will have been, I will have mastered, I will have secured, I will have drifted, etc., etc. And then we have these adverbs popping in between. Will have, virtually, will usually have. So we're getting adverbs before have, adverbs after have. And then we can start to kind of dig into these data. And on frequency information, in the same way as before, you can start to look and see, okay, which tag sets are common, which tag sets are not so common. And then we can start to dig into these tag sets and see, okay, how is the structure working? Does that make sense? Within this, we might be thinking about purpose. Maybe there's particular forms we want to teach and we want to bring that into our classes, or maybe we want to see how particular forms are being used to construct kind of time, or from a discourse perspective, how are these things being framed in different time frames? So there's lots of ways of using this type of data. Well, just as a kind of a, as we've reached the hour mark, as a little reminder, we cannot trust it 100%. It might be wrong. Sometimes it gets things wrong because it's all probabilistic in terms of the accuracy of the tagging. Now it's pretty accurate, but we still need to check. So what I always do when I use tag sets is I take random samples and I just check to see what the proportional error is of those particular samples. So would I code it the same way? Is it accurate? Are there any mistakes? And for example, in work I've done on modal verbs in the past, I did find that certain modal verbs, like will or can, because they've got multiple senses and different parts of speech, they can get those wrong. May, similarly. So what we need to do is just be mindful. But when we've included it in something like this, where all of these other bits come together, then it's less likely to be wrong because we're looking for it occurring with the form of have and a past participle, etc. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions for me about that?
Hi, Niall.
Yes.
Just a bit of information. So if you use Indonesian Cobra in Sketch Engine and you use the tag set, so I designed the parameter Indonesian tree tiger parameter file. And yeah, please don't trust 100% because it's not 100% accurate. So when I check on the training data, it shows like 95% accuracy. But when I tried it on separate data beyond the reference corpus, it drops to like 70 or 80.
Right,
Yeah. And lemmatization accuracy is also still not 100% accurate. But sometimes in corpus linguistic, we have to make decision. Sometimes we work with whatever available. Okay?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Pri, 100%. I think that's something that we always need to be mindful of. Like first that when we report on the data, if it's data that we made, that we give information on the tagging processes. And then also the accuracy is so important because sometimes when we do this, it's kind of an abstraction, isn't it? That we start talking about tags, but the tags aren't real, right? We apply the tags to try and make sense of the data. So we need to also be critical of those to make sure that we're not making inferences about language based on designs. Yeah, I totally agree. Question from Mohammed. Yes, 100%. So we put will and tag MD, and this is, I guess, is to show you maybe it's got two purposes in this workshop. One is that on the off chance that it will bring in, that there's a sentence somewhere that is organized in kind of an unusual way, that sees the word will being used as a noun and then followed by some of these features. Although that feels quite unlikely, at least it gives us a sense of control to make sure that that's happening. The second point is that I also wanted to use it as a way to illustrate this particular function, so that we can actually layer up information in the data in a tag query. So there's two ways, I guess. We've got ands and we've got ors. So here we've got and. I want it to be the word will, and I also want to make sure that that will is tagged as a modal verb. So it creates kind of mutually constraining kind of criteria, and it will limit the number of examples we get. This kind of line here is or. So we can say I want it to be a past participle or a past tense form. So the and the or is basically what they are. So they work in the very same way. And so it's maybe unlikely that we will have will as any other form here, but that's something we can do to make sure that it works accurately. Does that make sense? Maybe also just to as a way to show you that particular wild card.
Naya,
Yes.
sorry. Just to remind everyone, because I received some messages in my WhatsApp. So if
Uh-huh.
you want to share your findings, don't share to my WhatsApp or our committee or some course WhatsApp, because Neil is not in that group. So please share in the chat, or you can request us to share, or you can just share your screen, and Niall can quickly resolve that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If you have any problems, just let us know. And we can look at what you're doing and give you some advice. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to kind of build on this future perfect, and I'd like you to create one future perfect continuous. So we're getting a bit more focused grammatically. So try and find all examples of future perfect continuous. I will have been writing once a day by then. I will have been writing. So we've got layers there of forms. So take a few minutes to figure out how you might go about doing that. So I'll give you another minute or two just to try that, and then I'll give you a few possible ways into it and we can look at them. So I'll give you a little example. Oh, not this one, sorry. So first thing we can do is we could look at the verb will as a tag, the verb have as a tag, the verb be as a past participle, and then some form of continuous form. So if we click go, we'll get something like this. Will have been sitting, will have been learning, will have been hauling, will have been burning, and so on. Not so many examples, but that's not surprising. It's not a very frequent form, generally speaking. So within this, just to kind of see what have we got, well, we have our and tag. So again, will as a word, but also as a modal verb. We've got our base form of have. We've got our past participle form of be, and then we've got this. We've got v dot star g. So we could do v dot g here as well. But this will capture things like VVG, so a verb in the continuous form, but it will also capture things like VBG, a present tense or a present continuous form of be, or VHG, present continuous form of have. So by having that in there, it gives us all of these different variables surrounding that particular feature. Now, it doesn't necessarily give us everything that we might want. So if we remember the number of words we have there, we can see whether or not a different number, a different way of doing it will give us different different words. So we have much the same, but we're going to put one potential adverb in between each part. And see if that gives us anything. And so we see it's gone up to 27. So we will also have been pondering. So extra things being given there. And if we go here, I copy my last example, which I'll pop into the chat then. You can see when you copy from Word, it adds in spaces and things. I don't think it will matter, but best to remove them anyway. And then here it gives us the same. So there's nothing extra with any other range of adverbs. So at least that way we know that we can say we've been quite exhaustive with this. So this in general with this particular example of an expression, it's not such a common expression. So it's not surprising that it's so infrequent, but we can see that we've pulled out some nice examples then that we could dig into. And within this, we're kind of bringing together all of these different things that we've been kind of looking at, which is we've got our different tags, our different kind of building of tags, our use of wildcards, like the dot, the full stop, the asterisk, the and, etc. And these kind of curly brackets to allow for potential words happening in between. So I'll pop that in the chat if anybody wants it. But not necessarily the most frequent, as I say, of a form. So I think with this, okay, what we're starting to see is we can be quite precise, and especially when we're looking for things that are quite formulaic, so particular kind of aspects or particular kinds of tenses that are quite formulaic. And so we can pull out this kind of information and start to make more dedicated queries surrounding that and give us something to kind of work with. So with that, then I guess we can move to something that's a little trickier in this regard. And one of these that I guess is an example where you're not necessarily going to be able to get everything. That is something I wanted to say. On all of these instructions, I said, find all examples. We can't really know if these are all of the examples because every time we did the query slightly differently, we got a different number. And if we included pronouns as part of the search, then it made the sentences more constrained and we got different numbers, etc. So we don't necessarily know that we're getting everything because we don't necessarily know what's in the data. But what we can do is kind of build these queries, look at them in different ways, and then make sure we're very clear about what these are accounting for. So when we describe it, we're not saying we found all examples of the present continuous form or present perfect continuous form. What we're saying is we found all examples of the present continuous perfect form identified when searched with this query. And then we give the query because that's really what we found. We haven't necessarily found everything in the data. There may be other things happening that that we're not sure of. Yes, Abdul Hakim, yeah. So we can, if you, these queries are kind of they're corpus agnostic in the sense that it really depends on the tag set. That's the key. If your corpus is tagged with the same tag set, then you can use it in that corpus as well. But if it is tagged with a different tag set, you'll just need to change the codes. But the same principles apply, and the same kind of wildcard queries, etc. So that shouldn't really be too much of a barrier. You just need to get used to working with different tags. Sometimes, for example, I do contrastive work, so I work with different languages, and as Pre said, different languages have different degrees of, or maybe the quality of the tag sets are different depending on the kind of available training data, how well they've been developed, etc., how much funding they've had, things like this. But the tag sets do vary, so you just need to change the tag codes for different kind of searches that you might do. But the idea of using CQL in this way, square brackets, particular words, wildcards, etc., that will work for anything in Sketch Engine. So you might just need to change some of the tags around. I hope that makes sense. So so like I was saying with these ones that we've looked at, they're quite specific forms that we're looking at: present perfect, past perfect, future perfect, continuous. But when we want to look for things that maybe span sentences in different kinds of ways, then things can get a little trickier. And so one of those things could be something like the first conditional. So how would we find all the examples we can of the first conditional in a data set? So I'll pop an example in the chat there. So something like, if water reaches 100 degrees, it boils. Oh, that's not first conditional. It will boil, rather. Excuse me, forget that. It should be it will boil. That's the zero conditional. Okay, take the second one. If water reaches 100 degrees, it will boil. So how do we find these kinds of conditionals in the data? So take a little moment to play around with that and see what you think. What does that look like? This one might be a little trickier, but I'll show you a potential solution, but it's not perfect. Maybe you've got a perfect one that you come up with. Exactly. How could we find other examples of first conditionals like this? Um, I guess this is quite tricky because we've got longer sentences, we've got different positions in the sentences, we've got maybe different kind of forms that we might use. So these, when we come to these more complex structures that we might want to investigate, how could we find many of them? Without maybe limiting too much the structure of the form. So to give you maybe as a starting point, one thing we could look for is something like this. Yes, that's it. It's like, how do we figure out where it comes, what happens, where it goes, what goes before, what goes after? So as a first jump in, we might think, okay, we've got the word if. If is always going to be part of these conditionals, or most often anyway. And then we can use something like a square bracket open and closed, to say, okay, I want something to come after the if. And here we set a range. So in this case, I've put 1 to 5, but it could be more. It might be more. So we could play with that and see. And then after that, we've got some kind of present tense. So this, I guess, is going to be that like that first clause. So like if I go, something like that. And that will give us something like this. If a mosaic is, if any picture at all emerges, if a small area only has, etc., etc. And then what we want to do is we want to try and find modal verbs around that. So one option we have is to do something like this. We could go filter, we could set our range, 5 to the right, 5 to the left, and we could say tag equals MD. And so this will look for examples of modal verbs around it. Now, it's not perfect, this, because let's take a look at this one. Reduce solar radiation if the smoke persists. And the could is actually coming in on a different sentence, right? So it's not actually part of this structure at all. So this hasn't necessarily considered whether or not things are crossing sentence boundaries, etc. And so that's something that maybe will affect it. So another option we have is, if I pull up my query, is to do something like this from the start. So we could actually look for sentences in Sketch Engine. So we could say sentence containing, and then we keep the same query. And actually what this does is it pulls in the entire sentence as the quick, right? So we get a full sentence as the quick, and then we could do the same thing. And then we could go, but we're just searching for the quick. Tag equals MD. There we go. Now here we have to make sure that it says containing. And so we're keeping the ones that contain a modal verb in the quick. And if we do that, it reduces our focus. Now again, it's not going to be, how many do we have? So we've already halved that, right? So we are if we scroll down along through, what do we have here? If any mosaic in this region is to be considered a focus of widespread foreign contacts, this must surely be it. So that's a nice example of a conditional. What will he do with that? The Spencer, if Lamar, Dean are earlier or over. So we have these different kinds of conditionals emerging. Again, these are not all going to be conditionals. Because we haven't searched for conditionals. We've searched for strings of forms that co-occur typically to make conditionals. So what we would need to do is we can learn a little bit about how to sample these, check for errors, check for how accurate they are in retrieving what we're looking for, and make sure that we report that in terms of the analysis. So we do kind of proportional statistical reporting on the accuracy, based on the accuracy of the data. So different things to think about there. So this is one way into looking at these maybe kind of more complicated structures like conditionals, and then we can modify this to look for different kinds of conditionals. So instead of looking for present, we can look for past, we can look for past perfect, etc. And by working within the sentence boundary, it'll avoid us moving across sentences. And then we can pull the full quick down as the concordant as the kind of example sentence that we're interested in. If they drink and drive, they may put other people's lives at risk. So see, it's quite accurate in this way in pulling these ideas out. Again, not 100%, but a close way to try and pull out dedicated examples of the first conditional. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? I'm going to pop this in the chat for you just in case you're interested in having something like this. But remember that only gives you half of the clause, and the other thing we'll need to filter on the modal verbs, keep the modal verbs to try and pull that out. Does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay, well, that was my trickiest one. So after this, we're gonna cool down with things like that. Can we search about a word like love and the like? Yes, I mean if you want to search for things that are specific phrases, you don't necessarily need the kind of the corpus query language. You could look for it in simple phrases, but if you were looking for a word beside a phrase, what you can very simply do is, if I've understood you correctly, if you're looking for a word before, you can do something like Elsie equals and Elsie equals the Elsie equals like. So if you wanted to know what word comes before, you could do a string like this. And you can get things like developers and the like, cupboards and the like. There's lots of ways to do this. I don't want to say too much about concordancing because I think in the concordance session tomorrow, people will talk a little bit about this too. But you can also do things here where you look for forms to the left, forms to the right, and collocations and things like that. Can we search for words like love and the like? It means specific word and the like. Here, deal with meaning, not structure. Well, in terms of meaning, that's tricky because corpus linguistic software are typically form driven. So it's up to us really to try and identify the meaning behind the words in here. And mostly when we look within corpora, we end up looking at specific forms. So in a way, this kind of use of part of speech is a kind of a broader technique, and it allows us to look for more things together so that we can start to not necessarily look for form and find form. We look for like patterns and then we find forms that perform functions, that kind of thing. If we so typically we'll start with some kind of search of a form, but the broader you can make it, if you're interested in meaning, the broader you can make it, then the more certain you can be that you've got a range of things that are performing a particular function, if that makes sense. But it's not necessarily something where you can write in and look for particular meanings. Now, there are other kinds of tags that people use, the likes of semantic tags, but depending on how granular the kind of meaning it is that you're looking for, it may or may not be effective for what you're doing. So those kind of semantic tags are automatically generated based again on like probability and typical form usage, like meaning for meaning form relationships, things like that. So a bit, I guess, a bit mixed in that regard, but mostly this will be structurally driven if you're typing queries into the data because it's based on forms. I hope that answers your question, Yusreya.
Sorry, Niall.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question to Yusreya. So are you talking about something like thesaurus here? So word with similar meaning? You can just open your mic if you find it taking time for typing. But in sketch engine,
Hello.
there is yes, go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity for explaining my question. I mean, if I'm looking for the word like,
Mhm.
or the word love, or the word read, can we look for something like this? The words that give the meaning as these words. I mean, this is what I mean. Alternate words for the expression so and so. You have searched or you have a query about structure of certain tenses, for example,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
if I have an expression like I like reading, I like drinking, I like cooking, for example,
Mhm. Mhm.
can I have expressions like these in the text if I'm looking for
Yeah.
expressions?
If you're so, are you looking for like basically you're thinking about the form like I like plus something? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you do this, so if we do Elsie, um, like, and we'll get rid of this.
So it looks like the query like what comes before or what comes after like. This is
Uh,
right?
yes, I mean, you could. There's a couple. I'll do this here, and then we'll see if this kind of answers your question. We don't start, and the tag equals BVG. So we have so like playing, like talking, like spending, etc. So if you search for this in the using this particular query, it gives you all the examples of like followed by some kind of verb. If that's kind of answering your question in the first instance, then if you want to be able to see what's coming before it, you can. Well, one thing you can do is you can look for word forms to the left, word forms to the right as a first instance, and that can give you a sense of what's happening before or after within the data. And you can also do that on filtering. So you can, if you have a specific form you want to look for, you can look for it to the right or to the left. Or with sourcing, you can sort it to the right and to the left based on the query. So those would be some ways in. But if you click on this, for example, word forms here, it'll give you the words that occur to the left of I. So I like something, I don't like something, to like doing something, you like something, they like doing something, etc. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem. Um, okay, great. So what did I want to do now? Yes, so now I wanted to ask you to think about the kind of situations where you might be looking for something, it's polysemous and it's got multiple forms. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about the word fast, but I'd like you to think about how you might be able to find it as a noun or an adverb, but not as an adjective. Right? So we might see the word fast being used like to, I'm on a fast, where I'm not eating for a while. Or we might be interested in thinking about it as an adverb modifying a verb, but maybe not a predicative adjective modifying a person. Um, what kind of query could we write to avoid that? And there are multiple ways to get to such a point. This isn't the only way, but there's ways that you can do it with corpus query language as well. So have a moment to think about that. Okay, so we have a suggestion in the chat, which is perfect. So what we can do for this is we can use this and tag here. So we can say we want it to be the lemma fast or the word fast or something like that. But what we don't want it to be is an adjective. So we can use tag, and you notice we put a little exclamation point in between the tag and the equal to sign. And then that should allow us to be able to search for examples of fast where it isn't necessarily an adjective. So if we click on that, see it go, and there we have. We've got lots of different forms of fast, and in this case, they're not acting as an adjective. There are other ways that we can go about doing this. So a very simple one that we can use is this. So we could just do LC fast. So we get this, and then we could go here onto tags, and then we could say, okay, I want it as a noun and I want it as a verb, but I don't want it as anything else. And then we can just choose those ones. So within that, that's totally fine if that's our way in, if we're looking for one word. But when this is part of a more complex query, then we may want to be able to limit what's being pulled in as we move through the data. So this kind of approach previously of da, 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 of lemma fast followed by the tag with the exclamation point as a don't be this and then the tag that we're interested in doing. This is an efficient way to be able to remove the kind of tag we're not interested in. Does that make sense? And then I had one other kind of main thing I wanted you to think about with this in mind. Um, I want you to think about the word think. So often and actually this goes back to your question about like and followed with the present continuous, is if we take a word like think, which has lots of different particles that might follow it, what we might be interested in is think, but we want to think about it with words that follow it other than about, of, or it. All right. So how would we create a query that would find us examples of the word think, or the verb think more broadly. And then, but we don't want examples of about, of, or it. So, and everything but that. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. If you have any solutions, feel free to pop them in the chat as well. You've done so well to be coming up with these queries. I'm very impressed. Well done. So one way to do it would be something like think, think. So if we did something very simple like this, we'll get think followed by something. And then you can try to filter them out here. You could say keep lines not containing, and then we can list the words, right, that we don't want. But it creates more steps as we're moving through. So there's a simpler way to do this that would just involve one query. Now, if we pop this in here, we can say lemma think, and we don't want the word about over it, right? That's what we don't want afterwards. So we've got a little exclamation point before the word, and then we go. And then here what we get are think followed by other words other than those. Now, what we don't necessarily always have is clarity as to whether or not this is working within sentence boundaries. So are we getting think as it's crossing? Is think the last word on the sentence and then the next word in another sentence, another word? And are they actually related to each other in this kind of collocational or collocational way? So these are things that we need to be mindful of. So one thing that we can do, I showed you earlier how you could do something that contains sentences. So you want to pull out the full sentence. Here, maybe you don't want the full sentence, but you want to work within sentence boundaries. You can write within a sentence. And this means that we're only going to pull the ones that happen within sentence boundaries. And so that way it will limit the kind of focus that we have. Does that make sense? So with all of this in mind, then what have we looked at so far? We've looked at different kinds of wildcards, so where you can give multiple criteria to one character search, where you can use things like regular expressions, so like the period mark, the full stop, the asterisk, etc., the line for or, all of these things to kind of create more complex queries, the curly brackets to give optional ranges, or the question marks to give optional word or tokens being included in different places. So a lot of different things that we can then layer into each other. We can combine this with filtering, combine it with other kinds of practices as well. When we think about kind of how maybe we can bring all these things together, the kind of ways in which we can build queries feels endless. So we can kind of take something like this, where we give a range, and we could even make these ranges bigger, 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. We could make this you know, kind of larger and larger as we like. And if we perform search queries like this, what are we looking for? We're saying, I want adjective, 1 adjective, up to 5 adjectives. I want nouns, 1 up to 5 nouns. I want some kind of verb. And then after that, I want some kind of adverb, 1 up to 5, and so on. And so we can kind of bring in these different features. And by using the dot star, we're kind of not being exclusive. We're saying any kind of adverbs, any kind of verbs, any kind of nouns, any kind of adjectives. The kind of this particular kind of approach will give us a wide range of query searches, and we'll get all sorts of things here. And one thing that you get when you do these kind of varied searches, which may not necessarily be something that we want, is we get different lengths of our quicks that return, right? Because we're open, we're optional. We've got 4 words here, and then in other cases we've got more words, we've got longer sentences, and so on, as we move along. So we can have differing degrees of kind of results that are returned to us, and for comparison, maybe that's not always something that we want, etc. So different things to think about there. And one thing that we can do to kind of constrain that particular focus, well, also I guess I should say another thing we can have is sometimes we might get repetitive. Here we get some repetitive things from within the data, but we might also get repetitive things that use a smaller string from that data, right? So we're getting the same data here over kind of reused twice when really it's not necessarily something that we wanted, but it's because it's counting the tags in slightly different ways. And one thing that we can do to kind of counteract that is we can set other kinds of constraints. So we could say within 5. 5 here being the number of tokens that we have at the close of our quick. So we can say we don't want any more, we don't want any less, that kind of thing, or we don't want or we do want less, but we don't want more rather. So we can set that kind of overall range, and it limits then the number of things that we pull out. And so that's important, I guess, in that if, for example, here we could have up to 5 things here, 5 things here, 5 things here. If all of those criteria, and then one here, if all of those criteria were met, we could have a 16-word string. Now, it's very unlikely. But if they were all met, that would be a 16-word string. So this says it's just giving us where these occur within 5. So we'll avoid kind of repetition with that kind of practice as well. As we move through the data, then we'll see kind of some repetition, but less repetition to filter out. So this kind of last little example here within 5 allows us to dictate the range of the quick, how many words can be retrieved for the quick, despite the potential for more to emerge, and it can make our quick smaller, maybe a bit more focused. So that's something to be mindful of. So I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint for a second. So just to kind of get us towards a close for this session, really what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to see how can we use parts of speech queries as a way into the data to look for broader strings of texts that then we can start to analyze and look for patterns, variation, etc. The point behind this really is that what we're trying to do is use this broad taxonomy as a way to not delimit our focus too soon. One of the challenges in corpus linguistics is that if you search for forms, you're going to find forms. You're always going to find forms at the end of the day. So by using these kind of broader queries, we might find things we didn't even think we'd look for. And then our findings can maybe produce things that we didn't expect. And we can also have a little bit more certainty that we've tried to capture as many things as possible that could be satisfying the role of whatever it is we're looking for. And so these kinds of queries help us kind of broaden our scope and then make maybe more rigorous, methodologically robust studies, especially if what we're trying to do is generalize about kind of language or grammar or patterns, etc. So it gives us a bit more of an inclusive way to do this. At the core of all of this then ultimately is that we have a particular question when we come into the data. There's so many different ways we could put together a string of queries and analyze data that it becomes immense. So I guess we need to make sure that we've got a specific research question that we would like to address and that we dive into that question with appropriate queries. And so iteratively shaping one another. Do these queries help answer our question? I think at the core then is how can a complex query offer access to data that helps you answer this question? That's really what we want to know. And so if we layer in different levels of variability, we say there could be words occurring in between and around other things. Will it give us a more collective understanding of how this language works? Is that important for what we're trying to do for answering our question? But we have to also remain critical of this because there may be things that we exclude in our search. So one thing that I often do when I use queries like this is I do bottom up and top down, in that maybe I do a specific complex queries to try and look for particular structures, but then also I use simple queries to look for words around those structures to see, are there any other kinds of combinations of words that I'm missing here? Anything else that I'm not necessarily sure I'm going to see. And so we can use things like this as a way of triangulating within a study to try and check and falsify our own perspectives on the data and see whether or not there are things that might be missing. To kind of close with again, one last little cautionary note, which is that we have to remember that any kind of part of speech tagger is not atheoretical. it's designed based on trained on specific data to attribute specific grammatical categories to words. And we may or may not agree with all of these grammatical categories, and it may or may not be accurate at all times in assigning these categories. So we can't trust it implicitly, and I think we need to make sure that we know what it's doing, but also how accurate it is when it's doing it, and use this to kind of mitigate the kinds of analyses we do and the kind of claims we make based on these data. And so this is, I think, is general good practice for working with any kind of automatic tagger. And you see that in kind of the literature across the field. So I think maybe this is a good moment to kind of close, and I'm happy to take any questions people might have. If there's anything you're unsure as to what to do or how you might be able to use this in your research, feel free to pop some questions in the chat. And thank you very much. I hope you found that helpful.
Yeah, so we still have around like 10 minutes. So feel free to ask questions, or you want to share your findings if you find different things rather than what Niall presented. Yeah, and we can talk about that. I just want to point some of the aspect that Niall just talked to you about research questions, that in corpus linguistics, it is common for us to revise our research questions. So when we use a specific query and then we found something more interesting, so maybe we can revise our research questions, or maybe we can reconsider some of our research questions. Yeah, because we use a combination, as Niall mentioned earlier, like top down and bottom up. Yeah, but I think that's the beauty of corpus linguistics. You can just combine both of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody has any specific queries that you're trying to form for your own studies as well, feel free to ask and we can help with that. And I'll share all of these resources along with you to Pri, who can share them with you as well. Oh yeah, I see a question for Alma. So is CQL different from regex? Actually, CQL incorporates elements of regex. So the kind of the period mark as a character, or the asterisk as a kind of a way of being able to kind of look at truncation, comes from regex. So CQL uses elements of regex, and you can use regex on Sketch Engine in like phrase searches and things like that. So that's something that if you already are familiar with, then you can bring into your use in CQL. So yeah, they share some features. And it's just on studies that use the CQL and language learning. Yes, well, I guess in the context, Mohammed, I'm looking at your question in language learning. I think about this, I guess, largely in terms of things like DDL. So in data-driven learning, we're often looking at how we can get learners to study language patterns. And these kind of corpus queries can be a little complicated, but what we can do is we can develop queries like I have done today to share with you, and bring those into the classroom so we can give these to students to get them to analyze patterns and language, and then use that in that very, very typical DDL way where they start to try and figure out language patterns themselves, notice how language is being used, and reflect on that as part of their own learning journey. Likewise, what we can use is you can use these types of queries to prepare resources in advance, I guess, as well. Developing these kinds of queries, as you can probably see from today, requires some degree of advanced kind of linguistic knowledge and maybe relatively advanced computational skills. So doing this kind of work with learners might be a challenge, though not impossible, might be a challenge to build up their skills in this area. But what I would say is finding ways to bring in ready-made searches that you're happy with would work quite well. There's a nice tool or a nice website called BAW Quick Links, which I'll write it in the chat here. BAWE, BAWE. Quick Links, which is a project that was developed by Hilary Nessy and Bennett Vincent and Coventry University. And with that tool, what they do is they've pre-done a lot of work on corpus queries to identify good examples of particular language patterns, and then they've tagged them so that way people can be given these kind of URLs to particular searches, click on them, and then see examples. And they've already cleaned them up, and they've done all this work already. And I think something like that would work quite well, or does work quite well for language learners, because it takes some of the querying out of the process, and it puts them in touch with the language in a more kind of tailored way. So we're getting rid of maybe mistakes or noise or confusing examples, etc. So I hope that helps. Is corpus linguistics any which you can search? I mean, corpus linguistics, I guess it depends. You might get a different answer from each linguist that you ask as to what corpus linguistics is exactly. But I guess broadly, corpus linguistics is not just anything where you can pop a question in and get an answer back, because at the core, corpus linguistics is about the data. It's about what the data represents. It's about who the data represents. And it's about what that data can be considered to be representative of. So if you pull together a lot of texts, but the texts don't really have much of a relationship between them, and they're just a lot of different examples, it's not really a corpus. A corpus is more principled. So usually you might have something quite specialized or balanced but broad, in order to try and capture different kind of varieties of language use. But people will have differing degrees of variation of like how important these different things are, and depending on the purpose of the question. But but the most important thing really with a corpus is that we reflect on and we understand what this actually represents, because then the kind of conclusions we draw about the data, they allow us to talk about the data that the language represents, and more broadly the kind of people and language users that the data represents. So I hope that answers your question, Ijaz. Yes, so SQL can be applied to your own corpora uploaded to Sketch Engine, and in fact, other corpus query tools use SQL as well. They differ slightly in the code, so you need to learn different codes, but the principles are very, very similar. So with the likes of AntConc, with CQP Web, with other kind of tools like that, you can use SQL quite effectively. But if you upload your own corpora, it will work. It will work quite well for things like that. No problem at all. You know, ChatGPT can generate Python. Is there any other? Oh, I think ChatGPT actually could help you generate scripts for Sketch Engine too, in fact. I tried that out once to see if it would pull out similar queries to what I did, and some of them were similar. So there's enough information on Sketch Engine online. I think that it can generate them. You just need to make sure that they're accurate. My experience with ChatGPT and generating Python scripts is that it requires a lot of work to make them actually work for what you want them to do. The first time round is never quite right. So I would suggest that actually developing the CQL yourself is probably more beneficial, because A, you'll know exactly what it accounts for, and B, it helps you understand how your data works. It gives you a different way of looking at your own data, in this more structured way. But I think ChatGPT would be able to help with some elements of that. But it's not always accurate or reliable. So that's its problem, really, is that one time it'll do a good job, maybe the next time it won't. Can we build a corpus of magazine articles? Yes, I can't see why not, Shabana. But I guess with that, with something like building a corpus of magazine articles, really, I guess the challenge will be getting the text in a readable format. So if it's online articles, that's easier. If it's physical articles, then you'll need either some kind of transcription process, or OCR, so kind of automatic kind of transcription of written texts. Optical character recognition, I think it's called. So you can use those kind of tools to build out corpora. One thing with something like magazines is that in general they're quite multimodal, lots of images, lots of other things, lots of font and color and things like that have impact on the overall presentation of the text. So if you're building a corpus of magazine articles, you might want to figure out a way to engage with the notion of multimodal corpora, which are, I guess, still in an area that's in need of much development, but there have been advances in recent years. And there are corpus tools like Wordsmith tools that allow you to like upload video and an image and things like that to link with your text. So that's quite good for things like that. So something to think about if you're going to build a corpus of magazine articles. And I think just one more question in here. So I guess for anybody that feels like they're at the beginning of their trajectory in corpus linguistics, I'm wondering how to kind of advance. I guess probably things like this actually are, I think, the best way to be able to do that, because in workshops and summer schools, etc., these are the main opportunities we have as kind of researchers to be able to share the background of our practices, like how we did the research to get to the papers or the books, etc. And in books and papers, there's rarely much space to be able to give such detailed explanations of these things. So the best thing you can do to try and develop these skills is a combination of trying things out, pushing yourself to do things that are harder and more difficult than what you were doing before, so that you can see, is it possible? I always kind of operate with the idea that surely there must be an easier way to do this, or surely there must be a better way to do this. And when I think like that, then I'm trying to find a better way to do it. So if you take a kind of a perspective like that, but then also, I guess, bring with it your kind of ongoing development by attending these kinds of summer schools where people are talking about process. That's, I guess, the ways in which I would find it most, I guess, beneficial or helpful to advance in your skills in this area. I think that's all the questions there.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Niall, for your excellent presentation. And this session was so fun and also insightful. Everyone really enjoyed the session. Additionally, note that we have distributed the attendance list for this session. So if you haven't marked down your attendance, please do so. And we will let the forum open for about a few more minutes.
Yes, and tomorrow we will have a session on frequency list and concordance, which will be brought to you by Dr. Gede Primahadi Wijayarajek from University of Oxford and Udayana University. So make sure that you come on time, 3 p.m. Jakarta time, same as today, and we will have more insightful linguistic sessions together. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your day and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Niall. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Share with sounds.
Insights join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2020 tour. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course, knowledge to explore. Unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2020 tour. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time, let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time, let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course, knowledge to explore. Unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course, knowledge to explore. Unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2020 tour. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time, let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time, let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course, knowledge to explore. Unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course, knowledge to explore. Unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2020 tour. discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together we soar. From data to insights, join the ride. In a world of words, let's take a stride. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Dipscorling, it's our time. Let's make discoveries word by word, line by line. Welcome to Dipscorling, let's dive in. Corpus linguistics, where we all begin. Summer course knowledge to explore, unlocking language and so much more. Dipscorling 2024. Together we learn, together